From his family being politically persecuted in his native country, Chile, to landing the smallest of roles in Hollywood up until 2014, here's what Sarah Paulson revealed about Pedro Pascal's rough life before fame. The Bird Box actor was crucial to Pascal getting his big breakthrough in 2014. In a recent profile, the 48-year-old actress remembered the formative years of her 30-year-long friendship with Pascal. When he was going through a tough time in his career, he was having trouble landing work in the industry, and his financial situation wasn't great either. It was enough to put him off pursuing his dreams. He almost pulled the plug on his career of choice, but he didn't. Thanks to Sarah's support. She said he was someone you wanted to root for. It's safe to say that before the world ever saw the star quality in him, it was Paulson who recognized the hunger in him to become a star, but also kept it burning. She said there was something in the future star that made him stand out from the thousands of struggling actors who come to Hollywood to make it big. Something you could only catch in big-name Hollywood romantic comedy legends like Mel Gibson and Bruce Willis. At that point, she wasn't anywhere near that level of standing in the industry. Luckily for him, he found a friend, fan, and sponsor in Paulson, who said she would at times give him her per diem from a job she was working on. Not for any luxuries, but just for the bare necessities, like getting the money to feed himself. Indeed, survival had been the name of the game for him then. Pedro may have captivated audiences with his portrayal of a dad trying to keep his family together in the TV series The Last of Us, but it's eerie how closely it mirrored his own reality, as his own life was nothing less than a post-apocalyptic mess growing up. The big apocalypse happened when he was just 4 months old. Still too young to be aware of it, he was already rallying against dictator Pinochet's tyranny in his hometown of Chile. But perhaps the most harrowing incident of his life was the death of Pedro's mother, Veronica Pascal, whom he fondly remembers as the love of his life. In a fitting tribute to his mother's adult life of hardships and political persecution, the young immigrant tried his hardest to make it work. Despite all the hardships he would encounter in the ruthlessly competitive Hollywood scene, and it worked out. His first big break finally came in 2014, which was a full 17 years after he'd graduated from a top-notch acting school like Tisch. After having fled from Chile, landing in Denmark, and finally seeking a home in the USA, even in the States, he was never comfortable in any one place, constantly moving from one place to another as a new immigrant family. As Paulson's testimonials prove, it was more a matter of financial survival than anything else. In his young adulthood, he'd already moved from Texas to Orange County in California, and finally to New York City, before being forced to contend with his mother's death merely 2 years after he'd graduated from acting school. But both mother and son shared a love for movies. Perhaps it was an homage to her that saw him double down on his efforts to make his bones in the business. No matter how long it took or how hard it got, it was an interest that Paulson also shared, which was perhaps one of the reasons both actors hit it off so well, eventually leading them on a journey of mutual respect, admiration, and ultimately Hollywood success. But for the longest time, Pedro was landing only small-time guest appearances in shows like Law & Order SVU and Graceland. To the studio bigwigs, he merited only fleeting appearances at best, like his casting as a college student named Eddie in the Season 4 premiere of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Though studio executives only saw a guest role or on extras position, Sarah Paulson saw a star. It was this belief that led her to bankroll him with whatever bit of extra dough she had, a survivalist camp for the friend she believed would make it big sooner or later. And soon enough, he proved her right by using his meager resources to his advantage. When he didn't have a professional-grade camera to shoot an audition tape with, he used an iPhone instead, which was well outside the norm. Interestingly, he caught the attention of Game of Thrones showrunner David Benioff. Despite the poor, very amateurish production value, his acting chops were intense and believable, according to David, who ended up casting him as Oberyn Martell in his adaptation of the George R.R. Martin books. After this big breakthrough, things got a lot smoother. He probably didn't have to rely as much on the generosity of close friends like Paulson, because he was met with a range of offers from Kingsman to The Equalizer 2. But it wasn't until Netflix's hit show Narcos that the former immigrant finally became a household name in his new country, decades after he'd first arrived. In the intervening period, though, he'd often felt lonely and bullied throughout his high school years. But he found comfort in two things that probably kept him going: the movies and watching them with a friend like Paulson. As he said himself about this time, "I died so many deaths." He was, of course, referring to the countless rejections that had become second nature to him by then. He must have been learning to take it in stride, learning to become even more determined with each rejection. The American Horror Story actor vouched for her friend's state of mind as being committed, but also increasingly concerned about whether he would get his big break. Conventional sense would have meant ditching the dream and moving on. In short, it should have convinced him to let that delusion go, as the narco star would observe later. For the time being, though, he stayed on his path, because Sarah literally fed his dream. Also, that he could go on searching for working without, at the very least, having to worry about starving on his way to the top. The rest, as they say, is history. Today, Pedro is one of the biggest names in the industry. To think of how close he was to quitting before being rescued by a friend who had no selfish reason for it, except to see her friend's talent thrive and get due recognition. Is a story hard to believe until you hear it from Sarah herself. Still, she's stark but realistic in her description of those days, downplaying her own role in his eventual stardom and creating it all to his determination and pursuit of his dream. She captioned an Instagram post on account of her friend's 2019 Broadway debut as Edmund in a production of King Lear, "I am in awe of you." It is safe to say that this all has powered 30 years of their friendship through some of the toughest times in their lives. The years of struggle may have sharpened Pedro's chops as an actor too, all because he made the most of it, learning from rejection, failure, and friends like Sarah, and eventually became an actor known for his universal appeal and ability to document the highs and lows of the human condition. No doubt, seeing his mother pass away when he was just 24, or being too broke to afford his meals but still pushing through, and eventually tasting success in a massive way, all prepared him to become the actor he is today. In their latest appearance together on Saturday Night Live, both Paulson and Pascal showed just how in tune they are with each other, joking quite candidly and effortlessly about his now popular nickname of Daddy, a far cry from his earlier days of being virtually unknown in studio circles. And that's all for Paulson revealing Pedro's rough life before achieving fame.